Hello, and welcome to the Media Center's 11th Local Hero Award Series, in which we showcase 6 people from the Mid-Peninsula for outstanding achievement or contributions to the community. We solicited nominations and were especially looking for the unsung heroes. Each winner is an inspiration and each has a great story to tell. Living in California, probably most of us know at least someone who has made an undocumented and harrowing journey from Mexico to the U.S. Nora Razon was one of these immigrants, but her story is slightly different from many and frequently defies any stereotype. At almost every turn, by choice or by chance, things have been turned upside down or taken on a crucial twist. After living several years in this country, she now works at the primary school in East Palo Alto, creating a new model that integrates health and education with parent support. Nora, you've had a life of significant hardship, and I'd like to start out with what may be some of the hardest parts first, if it's all right with you. Tell me about the role of violence in your life.
Sure. Yes, there was a significant amount of violence early on in my life and in my family's life, a lot of which we're still healing from. My home was a place where there was violence. My dad was an alcoholic, probably still is, not really in my life anymore, and he was violent. He physically, emotionally violent towards all members of my family, and that really tainted a lot of my childhood. At one point, I went to foster care. Early on, it's one of my earliest memories, being 3 years old, being taken by social services, and it really, it's one of my earliest memories. It's also one of my hardest memories, and I think it's a hard memory for my family, because it was, now we were out, domestic violence is a very private matter, and having social service get involved now makes it a public matter, and so it's always been something that we don't talk about, but it's something that I remember very vividly as being kind of the beginning of my memories of my home life.
Wow. Now, one of those twists in your life, you often hear about foster care being really problematic for people. You had a different experience. Tell me about that.
Yes, I've reflected a lot on my foster care experience as an adult, and I have heard, stories and very real stories about foster care not being a positive place or space for a lot of people. For me, I've realized that I actually picked up a lot of resiliency through that experience, and it actually exposed me to a different reality that I think really helped me through other experiences in my life, where I went to a couple foster care homes where there was families that talked to each other, that where children played and there wasn't fear, where I felt cared about and not in fear of the adults. And so for me, it really helped me see that there was another way of being in a home and another way of interacting with parents and parents interacting with their kids. And so for me, it helped me come back, when I did come back to my family, to, even though when the violence continued or came back again, I didn't normalize it anymore. I knew that wasn't right. I knew that the things that were happening were not things that I wanted to have in my life for a long time, that I wanted to have a different reality for myself, for my siblings, for my, as an adult, for my kids. And that's where it started for me, wow. Seeing other people's homes.
At such a young age.
Yeah.
And then at age 7, you went back to your family. Another kind of flip side, you went through the harrowing experience of an illegal immigration to the U.S., went back to Mexico, and you were the outsider. Tell me about that.
Yes. I was 7 years old. it's the summertime after second grade, and my family packs up our truck and we drive down to Mexico, which was this imaginary land to me because I didn't have memories. I was brought to the United States when I was 2, and like I said, you don't remember those. I heard the stories, I didn't remember anything. And so coming to a small rural community in the state of Jalisco at age 7, and meeting family members I had never met before, and knowing that I'd been born there, so I was definitely where I belonged. But it was unexpected to go to school and then realize that I didn't understand as much Spanish as my parents thought I did, and I definitely didn't sound like the other children in the classroom. So it was a humbling experience to be not an English as a second language learner, but a Spanish as a second language learner in the country I was born in.
Wow.
So it was a hard time for the couple of years.
Well, and you got rescued, if that isn't too strong a word, certainly inspired by a particular teacher that you said changed your life.
Yes. When I was in 4th grade, I got a new teacher, and el profesor Jose Angel, who was just a different teacher. Even as I've met a lot of teachers in my life, as as a student in the United States and as an adult that now works with teachers, he worked in a small rural community, had no more than 10 students, and yet he treated us like scholars. He questioned what we thought. He allowed us to question what he thought. He presented us with supplementary books that were not provided by the government, and really encouraged us to dig deep into everything that we were learning. And I just remember feeling like it was such a safe place for me to explore and to think of different realities and possibilities for myself. And this was unusual because, again, this is a small rural community, and the likelihood that any of us would leave that community ever in our life, there was no middle school option for us for miles. There was no high school option for us for miles, and yet he treated us like we were going to go to Harvard one day. That saved me, in not just intellectually, but just to feel like you are an important being at age 8, 9.
Well, in fact, you were one of the few who did leave.
Yes.
And again, in a strange twist of fate, you came back as an outsider to East Palo Alto in 6th grade. What kind of culture shock was that?
Yes. So I came back in 6th grade, and this was 1997, to East Palo Alto, which is in the Silicon Valley. And it's the middle of 6th grade, and I remember my 3rd class in the day was a computer lab class. And so now I hadn't spoken English in 5 to 6 years. And so I'm hearing English, and that's a little, it's taken me aback. It's taken me a significant effort to understand what's going on. And then there's these computers, these PCs. And when I had left the United States before, I remember Macs, those little square Macs, and there was none of that. There was these new computers, and there was the internet. And so aside from realizing that I needed to really brush up on my English and speed my things up to understand what was going on, there was these computers that I now needed to figure out because I was behind. I realized about 4 months later that nobody knew what was going on, that this was new to everybody in the community and the region. But by that point, I had made myself a space in the computer lab during recess, during lunch, after school, trying to figure out how these computers worked, what the internet was. And I observed the computer lab teacher add hard drives, take hard drives away, troubleshoot printers, and just by observation actually learned a lot. And then suddenly I was the go-to person to fix things and to figure things out on the computers. And where I thought I was behind, I now realize that an entire community was behind.
So you went from feeling like one of the worst kids in class to one of the best.
The more
resident expert.
I thought I was behind, and then I turned out to be the most competent in terms of, you know, the technology used, because I put so much effort into trying to catch up. Turns out nobody had been exposed to any of this prior either.
All this time, and for a long time after that, you were undocumented, and you didn't tell anybody about it. What was that like?
It was a lot like not speaking about how my family was treated at home. You know, there was things that were private matters. You know, we didn't talk about my dad drinking alcohol. We didn't talk about my dad being violent in any way, and we didn't talk about not having documents to prove any citizenship status in this country either. We didn't talk, there were private matters, and there were things that if other people found out, it would jeopardize our family being together and being able to support each other. So I was silent. It was my internal business, and who I was publicly was not undocumented. I was Nora, and I tried my best, and I tried not to stand out as much as possible, but to do well enough to also not stand out.
So you had two Noras going on, and you said it was your internal business. Was it all that silence, that secret? Was it also an internal struggle? Was it hard?
Yeah, it's definitely hard because your silence protects you, and it also protects your family. And then you don't know who else is going through the same situation, though you have your, I definitely knew there were other people, but there was no way that we would identify each other because, again, you didn't know who you could trust. And again, we're talking about the late 90s, and in California, particularly at that time, was a very hard time to be an immigrant. There was a lot of scapegoating. You didn't know how people felt, even teachers, right, who, you know, definitely wanted to come and teach and do their best, but you don't know what their political biases might be. And so just keeping that and being invisible in many ways about that was hard. And then not knowing at that early on, even in middle school, I realized that the educational opportunities for undocumented students were very limited, that going to college was going to be a very unlikely situation for myself, that that wasn't something that was available to students that didn't have documents. So it was a struggle to be silent, and also to know that my status, that there was only so far I could go.
But of course, that all changed when you went to college track, and in part, that was related to you breaking your silence, as it were. And this came with another mentor attached.
Yes.
What happened there?
So I actually didn't. I still applied to be part of college prep programs. They seemed like good places to be. And what if something changed and I wasn't prepared to go to college? So college track was recruiting, and so I became part of the program. I helped recruit like a lot of my friends to come and be part of the program. I got the tutoring. There was all these programs. You know, I did the community service. I did everything, and I helped, you know, build out this program in many ways as a student, and just build relationships with the staff. And Marshall Lott, the director, the first director, and I think staff member number one, was one of the people who really I connected with. He had a lot of the same qualities as my teacher in Mexico, really seeing the best in me and treating me and acknowledging me through my strengths. And so it was really easy for me actually to forget that I was undocumented in that space, except when I had to apply to college, because that was kind of the whole point of the program, right? That you're going to apply to college, but then I hadn't shared that I can't apply to college.
The crucial detail.
I can't, and it took me, I remember like a week before applications were due, I finally broke down and shared that I was undocumented, and I apologized, I remember, because I felt like I had let them down. You've invested all of this time on me and all and I can't actually go to college.
What happened once you opened up?
Surprising to me at that time that I didn't disappoint them. That the reaction was that they felt this was an injustice. And I started seeing people, adults around me, problem solve with me. And like many other situations before that, I mean, I'd moved out of my house when I was 16. I'd had all this adversity already that they were aware of. And like, it seemed at times that I might break and not want to continue with my efforts to be different, to go to college, and I remember Marshall always asked, do you still want to do this? Every time something happened, and he would look at me, and I said, yes, and then he's like, we're going to figure it out. And so as I opened up about being undocumented, he said, you know, and I could see he had no answers about how this was going to happen, right? Because I'd Googled everything already, or back then it was like Yahoo or something, but he still asked the same question. Nora, do you still want this? And I said, yes, I still want this. And so he said, we're going to figure it out.
Okay, fast forward. You went to San Francisco State, and the punchline, the happy ending is you are now documented. But another twist was your path to documentation was a very unusual one. Tell me about that experience.
So I self-petitioned to adjust my status through what at the time, I think now they're U visas, but at the time the Violence Against Women's Act provides an option for women or children that have experienced abuse to self-petition, especially when their status might be dependent on the abuser, which was entirely my case, but it was really hard for me to ever connect these two dots, the violence in my home and my undocumented status, because again, there were private matters that we didn't talk about publicly, but we also kind of were, like, we didn't talk about privately very much either, or we didn't. And so for me, it was, I was 20 years old, and I had known about this piece of law, but I hadn't gone there with myself. And I remember going to, I'd been asked by a lawyer before who was connected to one of my mentors about, have you heard about this? Because I think people had like suspicions, but like I didn't give away any, I never admitted to anything. And so there's this piece of law that, have you heard about it? And so I'd read about it, but you had to be able to provide proof that something, that there was violence in your home and that it was connected to your being undocumented. So I remember going to the social service office and asking for my record. By that point, I had the Mexican consulate had provided IDs, which was something I didn't have before. So I went and I took my passport, and they looked up my records, and I remember the lady saying, would you like some water? Would you like some coffee? I was like, well, why would I need water or coffee? Like, you're just going to photocopy a few documents. She's like, sit down, I'll bring you some coffee. And so she brought me some coffee, and it took like 30 minutes for her to come back, and then she gave me like this stack of papers. Here's your file. And I took it, and again, I tried not to show too much emotion, and I walked to the train. I didn't drive, right? I was undocumented, couldn't get a driver's license, and so I'm on the train, and I start opening up these documents and start reading about the experience that my family and I had had at 3 and 4 years old through social services, and what the abuse had looked like, and what had prompted the foster care experience. And it took me like 20 minutes of reading through these documents to like have a realization of like, wait, this is me they're talking about. This is my story. I have experienced this. This is my life. And in that moment, I realized how connected my undocumented status was to the violence in my home. And I was able to use this as kind of the proof point to adjust my status. And I had to be able to turn in my application, get it approved before I was 21. This was 3 months before my 21st birthday.
Wow.
It took a lot of effort and a lot of people to help me do this, but I got my approval notice like 3 days before my 21st birthday.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well,
It's not been that long, has it? It was, what, recently?
It's been about 10 years now.
No, but I mean, since you've received your documentation.
It's been about 10 years since I adjusted my status. I recently became a citizen, and I voted for the first time in my life just this year.
Wow, what an election to vote in.
Yes.
You are now on the flip side of things. You are in a position to help other people that are in similar situations. You're working at a school. You've done a lot of community work. In all of these, what is the thread between your experiences and what you want to do for the people you're helping?
That's a very good question. I'm working at a new organization where we are working on, providing great education and trying to integrate health into what we're providing for students, but also working with their parents. Really, in working with their parents, because as an organization, we believe that if we're not working with the parents, then there's only so much we can do for the children, because their parents are their first teachers, and there's so much that they shape about a child's life and how they come into a classroom, which is something that I truly believe in. I really think that my mom would have been a different person as a mother, as a woman, had she had extra supports, had she had people to really confide in and to support her. And so bringing a lot of that, my personal experience, to how we're designing this program so that we are reaching the families that may have private lives that they're not bringing into their public spheres, but they are getting the support to be able to eventually, or when they're ready and feel safe, because we are providing safe places, get the support. So that's informed by my experience, and I have a lot of hope that what we're going to do is different, and that I'm the right person to do this work.
I'm sure you are. Just very quickly, you straddle two cultures. What do you most want the immigrants to know about life here, and what do you most want the rest of us to know about the immigrant culture?
I think regardless of whether you're an immigrant or not an immigrant, I think it's important for people to see people through their strengths. I think that's what helped me, become an exception to a rule, right? That people like me don't make it this far. That we see everybody through their strengths, that we see that everybody has something to offer their communities, whether you're an immigrant or not. In the case of immigrants, I think because being invisible or not sharing your story often kind of mutes other parts of your life, including your strengths. I think it's important to remind my people that what they bring, what the resiliency, the strength to come to this country, to work, to provide for their families, that all of that can also be applied in other spheres of their lives and other spheres of our community, that, helping their children with their homework or coming to meetings, creating community, all of that is possible in this country as well, and that there are people that care, and that there is so much that they have to offer still.
Excellent, excellent.
We would be a better place to be.
Well, best of luck with your school, with all of your work. Congratulations on the award, and thank you for coming. Do you know someone who has overcome significant hardship and has an inspiring story to tell? Someone who has sacrificed or given over and above to the community and deserves some recognition? If so, please contact us with your nomination for next year's Local Hero Awards. To find out more about our local heroes and to watch interviews with all of the winners, visit our website, midpennmedia.org. At the Mid-Peninsula Community Media Center, you can make your own videos and television programs and take classes in all aspects of media production. You can also hire our professional services team. To find out more about that, go to mcproservices.com. Congratulations to all our winners, and thank you for watching.